better part of 2 decades that I want to walk you through very carefully, not because it is complicated, actually because it is remarkably straightforward once you see the full picture. And the reason most people are missing it is that the coverage keeps separating three things that are not separate. They are the same thing. Here is the first thing. The Pentagon ran war games simulating a direct military conflict with Iran 18 separate times across multiple administrations, multiple commanders, multiple scenarios, and multiple decades of upgraded American military technology. They lost every single one. Not most of them. Not the ones where Iran got lucky. Not the simulations where the referees adjusted the parameters to test American vulnerabilities. As of right now, today, with American warships in the Persian Gulf, with a naval blockade running, with more than 10,000 American military personnel operating in the region, not a single senior Pentagon official has stood in front of cameras and explained publicly what those 18 war games actually concluded, not what the classified findings said, not what the strategic implications were, not what Iran's actual asymmetric capability profile looks like when it is fully deployed against American assets in a confined body of water the size of the Persian Gulf. The American public has been told Iran's navy is at the bottom of the sea. The American public has not been told why 18 separate simulations said that was not how this ends. Here is the third thing, and this is the part that connects everything and that almost nobody is putting together clearly right now. The reason those war games produced the results they produced, the reason 18 simulations across 18 years with the most sophisticated military modeling on Earth kept arriving at the same conclusion, is not that America is weak. America is not weak. It is that the Persian Gulf is not a battlefield that favors the way America fights. Not because of Iranian brilliance alone, not because of Chinese weapons, not because of Russian strategy, because of geography, physics, and a military doctrine. Iran has spent 40 years specifically engineering to exploit both of them, and understanding exactly what those war games found, what they kept finding, simulation after simulation, decade after decade, is the key to understanding why everything happening in the Persian Gulf right now is unfolding the way it is unfolding. So let me walk you through all three of these things properly. Because when you see them together, the classified wargame results, the public silence around them, and the geography that made those results inevitable, the picture that emerges is very different from what you are seeing in the headlines. Let me start with the wargames themselves, because I think they have been catastrophically underreported in a very specific way. The most famous of these simulations is one that actually became partially public. It was called Millennium Challenge 2002. The United States military spent 2 years planning it. They committed $250 million to it. They brought in retired Marine Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper to command the opposing Red Force, which represented Iran. Van Riper did not fight the way the American planners expected him to fight. He did not line up Iranian ships to be detected, targeted, and destroyed by American carrier-based aircraft at standoff range. He used motorcycle couriers instead of radio communications, so American signals intelligence could not intercept his orders. He used small commercial vessels, fishing boats, speedboats, fast attack craft to swarm American warships in coordinated waves. He launched cruise missiles from land, sea, and air simultaneously, overwhelming the targeting capacity of American point defense systems. He used light aircraft as suicide drones before America had fully developed the doctrine to counter them. In the first 24 hours of the simulation, Van Riper sank 16 American warships. That included an aircraft carrier, 10 cruisers, and 5 amphibious ships. If this had been a real conflict, that would have been the equivalent of approximately 20,000 American sailors killed in a single day. The Pentagon stopped the simulation. They reset the battlefield. They gave the Blue Force, the American side, advanced knowledge of Red Force positions. They restricted Van Riper's tactics to make them more predictable. They refloated the sunken ships and restarted the exercise with rules that ensured a different outcome. Van Riper resigned from the simulation in protest and then went public. He said, and I want to give you his exact words because his exact words matter, the exercise was rigged. The results were skewed to ensure a preordained conclusion. Now here is what I need you to understand about Millennium Challenge 2002. That was not the anomaly, that was the template. The 17 other simulations that followed, running through the Bush years, the Obama years, the first Trump term, the Biden years, kept producing variations of the same conclusion. American naval power, which is genuinely the most formidable naval force in human history in open ocean environments, faces a categorically different problem in the Persian Gulf. And the problem is not capability, the problem is geometry. The Persian Gulf is approximately 990 kilometers long and at its narrowest point near the Strait of Hormuz, only 54 kilometers wide. Those dimensions matter enormously, and here is why. An American carrier strike group operates best at distance. The F-35 has a combat radius of approximately 1,000 kilometers. A Tomahawk cruise missile has a range of approximately 2,500 kilometers. American military doctrine is built around the ability to project power from positions of safety to strike targets before those targets can strike back. In the Persian Gulf, there is no position of safety. Every American warship in the Gulf is within range of Iranian land-based anti-ship missiles from the moment it enters the water. Not from the moment a conflict starts, from the moment it enters the water. The Khalij-Fars missile, which Iran developed specifically as an anti-ship ballistic missile, has a range of 300 kilometers and travels at speeds that make interception by current American defense systems extraordinarily difficult. The Noor anti-ship missile, Iran's domestically produced version of the Chinese C-802, has a range of 170 kilometers, flies at sea-skimming altitude to avoid radar detection, and can be launched from land, sea, or air platforms. Iran has deployed both of these systems in numbers that American war planners have described internally, according to leaked assessments, as deeply concerning. But the missiles are not actually the hardest part of the problem. The hardest part of the problem is what military strategists call the swarm. Iran currently operates somewhere between 1,500 and 5,000 small fast attack craft, depending on which assessment you use. These vessels travel at speeds of up to 60 knots. They carry anti-ship missiles, torpedoes, rocket-propelled grenades, and in some configurations they are designed as suicide vessels packed with explosives. In a confined body of water like the Persian Gulf, saturating an American carrier group with a coordinated swarm attack from multiple directions simultaneously is not a science fiction scenario. It is what Paul Van Riper did in the first 24 hours of Millennium Challenge 2002, and it is what Iran has spent the 23 years since that simulation specifically training for, refining and expanding its capacity to execute. The USS Cole was nearly sunk in 2000 by a single small boat packed with explosives operated by 2 men. Now multiply that threat by 1,000 simultaneous vectors in water where American warships cannot maneuver at the distances their defense systems were designed to require. That is what the war games kept finding. That is the problem that 18 simulations could not solve. Now I want to address the strategic layer of this, because the geography is only part of the answer. The deeper answer is doctrine. Iran calls its approach to asymmetric naval warfare the mosaic defense. The core principle is this: if you cannot match your adversary's strength, you deny them the environment where that strength operates. America's strength operates at distance with precision against identifiable targets. Iran's mosaic defense deliberately eliminates distance, deliberately degrades precision by saturating targeting systems, and deliberately makes targets unidentifiable by mixing military assets with civilian maritime traffic. Think about what that means practically in the Strait of Hormuz. On any given day, the strait handles roughly 21 million barrels of oil passing through it. That is 20% of global oil supply moving through a waterway 54 kilometers wide. It is one of the busiest shipping corridors on Earth. Iran's fast attack craft operate in that environment. They look like fishing boats until they do not. They move like commercial vessels until they do not. They sit among hundreds of civilian ships that American rules of engagement require to be positively identified before engagement. By the time a targeting officer on an American destroyer has confirmed that a fast attack craft is a military threat rather than a fishing boat, the firing solution window in a swarm scenario may have already closed. This is not a hypothetical. This is what happened in the actual war games. This is what the classified assessments that preceded every single American military escalation in the Gulf over the past 20 years have warned about, quietly, internally, in rooms where cameras are not allowed and reporters are not briefed. And this is what Iran's military planners have been deliberately optimizing for across 4 decades of doctrine development, equipment procurement, and tactical training. Now let me address the silence. Because the silence around these wargame findings is not accidental, it is not confusion, it is not oversight. It is not that the results were inconclusive enough to avoid public discussion. The silence is strategic, and understanding what that silence protects and what it costs is essential to understanding the moment we are in right now. Here is what the silence protects. The credibility of American deterrence rests partly on the assumption that adversaries believe American military power is overwhelming and unchallengeable. If the Pentagon publicly acknowledged that 18 simulations of an Iran conflict produced 18 American losses, that acknowledgement would immediately raise questions that allies, adversaries, and the American public would demand answers to. Questions like, if we cannot win a simulated conflict with Iran, why are we deploying carriers into the Persian Gulf? Questions like, what does our military presence there actually deter if Iran's doctrine neutralizes our advantages in confined waters? Questions like, are the Gulf states that host American bases and depend on American security guarantees protected by a capability that the Pentagon's own simulations say does not perform as advertised? Those questions do not have comfortable public answers, so the findings stay classified, the simulations stay internal, and the public narrative stays focused on American military dominance, on carriers and destroyers and Tomahawk missiles, on the language of overwhelming force that has defined American military communication since the Gulf War of 1991. But here is what the silence costs. The silence means that the American public, the American Congress, and even many American allies are making decisions about a conflict in the Persian Gulf without the most important piece of strategic context available. They are watching American warships enforce a blockade of Iran and thinking, as certain political leaders have encouraged them to think, that Iran's military has been so thoroughly destroyed that the risk of catastrophic escalation is minimal. The war games say otherwise. The war games say that a degraded Iran with its air force grounded and its naval surface fleet reduced, is still an extraordinarily dangerous adversary in the specific